ready to go? All right, everybody, we're going to get started now. This is a lightning talk session. We're going to have 9 speakers at 5 minutes each, and I won't take another second of that time.
Thanks. Okay, this talk was sparked by a comment Jem Groom made at last year's OER17 about how OERs might be implicated in strategies for cutting public sector spending on education. It got me and Wolfgang, my partner in Austria, thinking about this and about our own experiences with educational technology. So Jane Austen, commonly seen as a romantic novelist, was actually a very sharp observation of economic changes in her own time, especially the economic changes the rural gentry were going through. And she used humour as a weapon, which I think we should also be well advised doing. So in our approach to this space, we should be more like Jane Austen, I think. The Belly of the Beast. This image is from just before the First World War by George Gross, and it equates to what we would say is an emotional picture of life under neoliberalism. And this is what many of our fellow citizens have been experiencing for the last several decades. Now, neoliberalism, this is the short version. From about 1930 to about 1970 odd, power and wealth was being transferred from what is known as the ruling class to the rest of us, especially after the Second World War. Great advances in welfare, health, housing and education. By about the early 70s, this had become an existential crisis for the wealthy and the ruling class. And the response of this was neoliberalism. That's the short version. So understanding neoliberalism in quotes, I'll read them out because of the size of the place. It started with Tina, which we're still living under. There is no alternative by Margaret Thatcher. The End of History by Francis Fukuyama, that things couldn't get any better than this. Globalization is as inevitable as the weather, Tony Blair. In 2008, this sucker could go down by George Bush. And we're still living in the crisis that began in 2008. So that's the trajectory of neoliberalism, from pomp to permanent crisis. And we're living under that at the moment. In our context in the UK, 2013, the Red Cross started distributing food in the UK for the first time since the Second World War. In 2017, the Red Cross announced a humanitarian crisis in the NHS. So what we're looking at is the final acts of dismantling the post-war settlement of advances in health, social care, welfare, education and housing. So educational technology, this is our experience to some degree of several decades of educational technology. In some ways it's a neoliberal attack dog dressed up as a TED talk. Some of these quotes give you an idea of some of the dodgy ideas and dodgy organizations that can be involved in this space. It's not in any way a neutral space. One of the abiding principles of neoliberalism is there's always a technological solution to any socio-economic problem. That's one of the delusions of neoliberalism. So this is our predicament, nicely summed up by the American Michael Apple. Until we take seriously the extent to which education is caught up in the real world of shifting and unequal power, we will be living in a world divorced from reality. Again, that's been our experience. So ways of seeing who runs this place based on the work of Anthony Sampson. This is our initial power map of technology and education. The little red dot are the interests of learners. If we could have made it smaller, we would have. This is our power map. You might want to make your own. It's quite a useful exercise. You'll see social media and celebrity experts and think tanks have got quite a big role in this. So, summing up for the future. To develop alternatives, we should know from where we are starting, and we do think there's a democratic deficit in our education system at the minute as the result of neoliberalism. And we do think there's lessons to learn from the 19th century. And there is definitely a role for the state, public institutions and government in rolling back privatisation. One of the myths of neoliberalism is the state has no power. The state has never been stronger. The state is what is implementing neoliberalism. It's not some God-given calamity. That's it.
All right, thank you. And while our next speaker is setting up, does anybody have a quick question or comment? I've warned the speakers that if they go over time, I'm going to play music. Any song requests? Or is there a copyright restriction? I won't play any more than 6 seconds. Okay. I was thinking Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley.
You dare.
Take it away, Lorna.
You dare. I'm going to be very fast then. Okay, are we ready? My name is Lorna Campbell, and this is my blog. It's called Open World. It's powered by Reclaim Hosting, and the title is inspired by Kenneth White, a Scottish poet and chair of 20th century poetics at Paris Sorbonne. Mostly I write about work, about conferences and meetings I've been to, presentations I've given, papers I've written. Sometimes I write about my thoughts on other people's writing. Sometimes I write about the frustrations of being a woman working in technology. Sometimes I write about events like Open Access Week. Thank you, Nicole. Is that on? Hang on. Yep. Hello. Do you want me to start from the very beginning again? Okay. I have to go back then. So, once more. Ready to go? This is my blog. It's called Open World. It's powered by Reclaim Hosting, and the title is inspired by Kenneth White, Scottish poet, chair of 20th century poetics at the Sorbonne. Mostly I write about work, about conferences and meetings I've been to, presentations I've given, papers I've read. Sometimes I write about my thoughts on other people's writing. Sometimes I write about the frustrations of being a woman working in technology. Sometimes I write about events like Open Access Week, Ada Lovelace Day, or International Women's Day. Mostly I write about open education. Sometimes I write because I want to, but sometimes I write because I have to. Sometimes writing is a necessity, a catharsis, the only way to process experience or events that are too overwhelming, too infuriating, too incomprehensible to mediate in any other way. That's when writing gets personal and political, messy, emotional, and confrontational. I seem to be writing a lot more of these personal blog posts recently, after the failed Scottish independence referendum, after Brexit, after the US election. It was Helen Beathan who called these posts shouting from the heart, and I guess in a way they are. There's no denying that they're a personal emotional response to events that still seem to be utterly incomprehensible to me. There's also quite a lot of swearing involved, but I'm not going to apologise for that. So what has any of this got to do with open education? I've always had a strong personal commitment to open education. I believe passionately that as educators, we have a responsibility to work together to improve opportunities for all, not just for the select few. I believe there is huge creative potential in openness, and I believe we have a moral, ethical obligation to open access to publicly funded educational resources. These words are from the Scottish Open Education Declaration. I wrote them, and you know what? I actually believe them. These aren't hollow words. I actually have a genuine commitment to them, and that's why I find it increasingly difficult to disentangle my open education work from the personal and political. And to be honest, I don't really care, because never has the feminist rallying call, the personal is the political, rung more true than now. I know I'm extremely fortunate to be in a position where I can write these political blog posts without fear of reprisal, and I'm very aware that this is an incredibly privileged position to be in. It's very easy for some of us to take openness for granted, but it's important to remember that for many, there's also a risk associated with openness, because openness, education, knowledge, all seek to challenge structures of power and control. And in talking about risk, I don't mean risk in the abstract sense. Do any of you know who this man is? This is Basil Cartabil, a Syrian open source software developer, open knowledge advocate, Wikimedia editor, and project lead for Creative Commons Syria. Basil is also a contributor to the new Palmyra project, a digital archaeology and open data project that aims to create a virtual reconstruction of the ancient city of Palmyra, much of which was destroyed by ISIL during the Syrian civil war. Basil was detained by the Syrian government in 2012 and held in Adra prison in Damascus for 3 years. In October 2015, his name was removed from the prison register, and despite calls from numerous human rights organisations, his whereabouts are still unknown. In order to raise awareness of Basil's disappearance, a group of open practitioners came together to write the open e-book, The Cost of Freedom, a collective inquiry. My contribution to the book was a short piece called The Open World, which touches on the personal risks, costs and benefits of openness, much like this talk today. The plight of Basil Cartabil is a sobering reminder of the risks of openness, proof that open is always political. But it also shows why we need openness more than ever, because openness is inextricably bound up with freedom. And in the word of an older declaration, another declaration, the declaration of our growth, it is in truth not for glory, nor riches, nor honours that we are fighting, but for freedom. Thank you.
The next speaker is getting set up. Does anybody have any quick questions or reflections on that? And thank you, Lorna, for coming in right at the 1 minute mark. Very well done.
Can everyone hear me? Kelly Terrell, and I'm from the University of Southampton. I'm part of an enterprise team here that's part of the Web and Internet Science Research Group, and this is in the Computer Science School. And here we develop and maintain EdShare, which is an OER sharing platform built upon the open source software ePrints. And this has played a key role with institutions and organisations all over the world that have been engaging in the open access space. EdShare itself is an incredibly powerful and flexible platform designed for educational materials. It was created back in 2008 at Southampton as part of a research project and is now powering a number of institutional and community spaces which provide access to OERs as well as hosting some more closed resources. What EdShare did was took a traditional repository model and modernised it by applying the features and behaviours we've come to expect as just standard in the modern Web 2.0 shaped world. This included things like an immediate deposit process. There's no going through an editorial team or anyone checking it before it goes live apart from you. Live editing of items, even though it's live, it's still yours to change. And features connecting the user community, as well as optimizing the interface for the nature of the content that's being held. So taking a closer look at some of those features, I've already mentioned immediate deposit. There's varied viewing permissions, so you can decide who can actually see. So this is satisfying local needs as well as a global audience needs. You can also share editing rights, so you can share the rights for other people to change your content with either selected individuals or across your community space, or even open if you wish to. There's inline previews, and this was something that was really key for EdShare. And again, it's just normal now that if you're uploading a file, people just want to check it out. They don't want to have to download anything large in order to decide if it's right for them. We also stream audio and video content, and this is done using HTML5. And through some work with Glasgow Caledonian, we also produced an embeddable HTML5 player. So exactly in the same way you can go to YouTube, you grab a little snippet of code and you can embed that video in your space. That's what Glasgow Caledonian did, embedding their videos in their institutional VLE. There's also features for providing comments and feedback. And very much it's important that the community have a presence. And this is about showcasing the excellent work that lots of educators are doing, and they don't have the space to show off their work. So there's always questions about systems, and I think particularly when they come from within institutions, about their sustainability. And that's regardless of the climate. And this is one of the key strengths of EdShare. Firstly, it was built on the OAI compliant software ePrints being used in the open access space, and as well as this being a proven system being used across the world for more than 15 years now, it means EdShare is able to benefit from a huge amount of overlapping work that's happening in this space to do with interoperability, discoverability, searching, statistics, and all of this, it's not specific to OA, it's very generic in nature. So there's reduced duplication of effort and less of a need for an entirely separate line of investment. Our team works with the community and we provide services. We don't charge for the software. And this is about ensuring its future development going forward. And that's something we've been doing for over 10 years. Developments are also distributed across the community. So that feature I mentioned that happened at Glasgow Caledonian, that is now in our EdShare core offering. So it's available to all. So it's not reliant on one single organisation to ensure it goes forward. And this provides us with a very agile approach so we can meet local needs, and EdShare is also able to support rapid innovation where it's needed. The key thing here is that collectively we own this space, and therefore we own its future direction in that it takes in terms of supporting OER and open educational practices. And this, what I'm about to say next applies generally to the web, because when we have standards and consistency between spaces, we can build add-on services to take advantage of them. So I'm very pleased to announce that we've launched edshare.ac.uk, which is going to act as a central reference point for everything that is happening around EdShare and the community. And in particular, what we will shortly be doing is launching the EdShare Hub. And this is going to provide a federated search across all of the instances that exist to draw out the open content that exists across that network. And as we move forward, we'll be looking to add further features and services to this site. And again, this is based on what the community needs, as well as publishing a future roadmap for EdShare. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. While our next speaker is setting up, are there any questions?
Just asking if EdShare can be used worldwide?
It depends on the particular space. So at the moment, it's a mix of institutional and community spaces. Spaces like Humbox and spaces like Loro, they allow anyone to register, absolutely anyone. So if you're in the humanities subjects area, you can use Humbox. It's all about these spaces existing. So if we can create a space that anyone across the globe could submit to, we could create that.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? No pressure. Okay.
Okay. So my name is Ewan McAndrew. I work at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm joined by Dr. Martin Poulter from the University of Oxford. And first thing is always open with a quote from Vladimir Putin. So this is about the WikiCite initiative, which is a new initiative. So as you've probably already heard, post-truth is the International Word of the Year. Emblematic perhaps of a year when objective facts have arguably been less influential than appeals to emotion and personal belief. Oh, is that going to work? No, it's us. Okay, cool. So, with over 60 trillion web pages to navigate and terabytes of structured and unstructured data to interpret or misinterpret, arguably it's never been more difficult to find truth in the numbers. But you can do it. The digital intermediaries that we act as gatekeepers to this knowledge can provide attribution for the facts they're producing in their answer engines. So if you ask Google, what's the UK's GDP, you can click through that link to World Bank figures from where that figure's coming from. They're just not doing it all the time. So if I ask, what's the average lifespan of a goat, a more pressing question, for instance, Google will tell me it's 15 to 18 years, but won't give me any attribution as to where that information came from. how can I know it's verifiable? How can I check? Siri does the same thing. It will give you an answer about how long do greyhounds live. Okay, 11 years, but how do I know that's actually accurate? They're saying it's from Wolfram Alpha. So if I go to Wolfram Alpha and ask it questions about greyhounds and goats, it completely contradicts Google. Says a goat's 21 years for its lifespan. So where's Wolfram Alpha getting its information from? This list of impressive looking sources at the bottom of the page looks great. The disclaimer at the bottom of the page is less great, and you have to click in to find this disclaimer. Requests for researchers for detailed information on the sources can be directed here. Requests will be handled on the basis of priority, importance, and available resources. So, we have a problem. What can we do about it? And at that point, I'm going to hand over to this gentleman.
Okay, not a tool, not a solution. There's no single technological fix to this problem. It's a social problem, but maybe a ray of hope. This initiative called WikiCite. Now, WikiCite's an activity. It's not a platform or a piece of software. It's an activity, something that's happening on Wikipedia and Wikidata. And the idea is that imagine citations are currently an optional extra on the claim. You make the claim, and if you like, you could type some sort of citation for evidence. Could we reorganize the web to be citation-centric? So Wikidata is the Wikimedia data source. So it's built in idea. You put data in a particular place, and it percolates out maybe to hundreds of other websites because it's freely reusable data. So it's facts about all sorts of things in the world, say about London, and some things in the world are publications. So you can have facts about books and papers, lots of bibliographic data. You can connect them. So a fact can have stated in, or a fact can be connected to its evidence. So yeah, a publication can be connected to facts that's stated in. That's sort of bundled up. The data that's exported, the citation is integral to the data that's going out to sources like Google. So this could sort out the mess of unstructured, semi-structured citations in Wikipedia, clean up what's available to external sources, and enable scholarly profiles and altmetrics and so on. And it's not something being done by volunteers on the website. We have Zotero and Crossref and so on as partners. That's a journal article in Wikidata, so you have bibliographic data and the concept in it and the license, so you can query open access. And so there's all sorts of queries you can do with this. There's citation analysis. So far we have Zika virus, all the papers related to that, and play with that. But we want millions of publications, like all the scholarly literature in Wikidata. There's lots of things you can do with it. But imagine a paper's retracted. So currently, if you find it's retracted, no, we've got to find all the citations of that paper, including the mistyped ones, and correct those articles, those papers. In this scenario, you add the retracted tag to the paper in WikiCite, and that information percolates out to all the sites that are using that citation. So the red button will come up in Wikipedia. This article is based on research that has been retracted by the authors, by the journal, and so on. And there you go. That's a possibility for the future. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any questions or comments while we're transitioning? Great presentation. How long does a boat live for?
We don't know. It's 15 to 18 years or 21, depending on who you ask.
The question was, how long does the boat in fact live?
Okay, so me again. I'm going to talk about Wikipedia's new content translation tool. It's only 2 years old, approximately, but it's making a big difference in how knowledge is shared between language Wikipedias. I was in a small village in northern Italy when Jimmy Wales made this comment about building bridges, not walls. Brexit and Trump were very much on his mind because the result of the Brexit referendum happened exactly as the Wikimania conference was happening in Italy, which bamboozled me because here we were with 1,200 Wikimedians from all across Europe and all across the world, from different languages and different backgrounds, all passionate about sharing open knowledge and working collaboratively, and we were turning our backs on that. So it was at this session that I found out about the content translation tool, which should be a video that's beginning to play, but it's not. But essentially what it does is it will bring up an article in one side of the screen and translate it paragraph by paragraph, taking all the formatting across, so taking out all the headaches of publishing an article in another language, Wikipedia. Oh. Yep, okay. So it takes all the formatting across, so all the translator has to do is focus on the words, because machine translation, while helpful, is not the end that you want, because a 100% machine translated article is not useful. So I brought this back to University of Edinburgh, mentioned the Translation Studies Masters course directors, and they said, why don't we use this on the independent study module where students in their own time translate 4,000 words. So these were the language pairings we worked with, 28 students on that course. And if you want to see the assignment, it's at tinyurl.com translate wiki. And it was very successful. We began with two-hour workshops. The first one, at the beginning of the term, introduced them to Wikipedia training, policies and guidelines. And at the end of that, they were given advice about how to choose their article, how to choose a good quality referenced article. And there are a number of tools that can help narrow this down. And then the following week, they came back with their chosen articles, and we ran through the content translation tool, how it works. And it's really intuitive. And so that took just a short amount of time, and then they began translating the chosen article. They were really empowered and motivated by the fact that language is really unevenly spread in the different language Wikipedias. You'll see that English Wikipedia is by far the largest with 5.3 million articles, and then it drops dramatically. So this is a really impactful way for students and translators of all kinds to share knowledge with the world. And the feedback we got was great. They were getting published meaningful practice. It was very fun and challenging at the same time, but they found it very meaningful, and they feel they were contributing to Wikipedia, to people, to society, as well as learning new skills. So we got Dick Turpin in Japanese, Anarchism in Chile from Spanish to English, Cosmetics in Ancient Rome from English to Chinese, Modern Arabic Literature from Arabic to English, United States Presidential Debate from English to Chinese, and Portrait of a Lady from English to German, among many, many more. So it was a double win. Students are really engaged, tutors are really engaged, and we want to continue this. We've been doing it for one semester. We're continuing it this semester, but we're reversing the language direction, so it's a real two-way knowledge exchange. And I commend it to you. We're going to hopefully continue with it in many more years to come. We have a case study, a blog article, video interviews if you'd like to find out more. So as we sail away from the rest of Europe, there will at least be one part of Scotland that remains proudly European and proudly international, because ultimately knowledge creates understanding, and understanding is sorely lacking at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Question in the back.
you have any data on the number of pages that have been translated from another language into English? And what is that? How does that compare to English to other languages?
There are stats, and there's a really lovely sort of curve that goes right the way up about all the languages that have been worked. So there will be detailed metrics. I don't have them immediately to hand, but I can fish them out for you and get back to you about that. But yeah, the way that content translation is taken off has been hugely successful, but in some ways we've had to limit it because we were finding that some people are just sort of putting 100% machine translation articles on there. So we've had to sort of say, okay, you need to edit Wikipedia for a little bit or be a confirmed editor before you use the tool. But so there is still sort of like, but essentially it's been a huge success, and we're still sort of seeing the benefits of that.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Hello, everybody. My name is Claudia, and I'm going to talk briefly about OER qualification measures for university lecturers. So, first off, there's probably one thing that we can all agree on, and that is that we would like to see more people producing and using open educational resources at the university level. The thing is, as it turns out, it can be very difficult to convince people to actually change their behavior. I know, right? It's a huge surprise. But it's a bit like the healthy eating paradox. It's simple to convince someone that healthy food is good for them, but it's an entirely different matter to convince them to actually change their diets. And this is kind of the issue that we are facing here. So, how do we get university lecturers to use and create OER? Open Education Austria is the project that I'm working for, and we have come up with a strategy in that regard, and it goes beyond a mere introduction to the concept and the purposes of OER. Because we have found that knowing about these things just isn't enough. People that first learn about open educational resources, they might be interested, but they hardly ever run home, fire up their laptops, and get busy creating open educational resources. So, what to do? Here's our plan. Step 1. Open Education Austria is a collaborative project of 4 Austrian universities, and they're spread out across the country. So there's Vienna, there's Graz, and there's Innsbruck. The first step is to provide introductory workshops for all 3 locations, where people get like an introduction to the basics of OER and copyright issues, but they also get their first hands-on experience in searching for and producing open educational resources. Step 2. We also created a MOOC on the topic. So this MOOC is taking place right after the workshops, and in this MOOC people get more in-depth information, they get to complete small tasks, they take quizzes, and there's a moderated forum. So the benefits, the advantages of throwing a MOOC into that mix are fairly obvious. One is that we get all those slightly somewhat interested people online, where they get to have links to OER repositories, they see videos that help them navigate these websites, and they get more involved into the issue as such. And that's actually another point. After connecting to the people that they have met at the workshops, at the MOOC, they have the opportunity to connect with the people from other universities. So they can talk in the forum, they can ask questions, they can discuss issues, and they can share their experiences. And we hope that this will help them to get more engaged in the topic. Finally, step 3. We invite all those people to the first ever Austrian Open Educational Resources Festival. This is a one-day event that will take place at the end of May. And there are more lectures, there are more advanced workshops, and of course there are plenty of opportunities for networking and face-to-face exchange of the participants. As you can see, all those 3 steps take place over the span of little more of a month. So in order to keep people on the topic and to not lose their interest in between. After they have completed all 3 steps, the workshop, the MOOC, and the OER festival, they will then be issued a certification. So to conclude, the benefits of this strategy that we think are associated with our approach. Unfortunately, I can't share any results yet because we have not put everything into practice just yet. Maybe next year's conference. But just to explain our ideas behind the concept. So the first ones are fairly obvious. People gain more knowledge and an increased awareness for open educational resources, for copyright issues, and how that affects lecturing at the university level. They also get plenty of opportunities to put that knowledge into practice and to apply it to their own classes, courses, and to start practicing. The last and very central aspects are community building and encouragement. We believe that those are especially important because, as many of you know, I'm sure, and as in fact it has been mentioned in many talks at this very conference, working to promote OER is a bit of a lonely endeavor. And therefore, it is important to get these people together, to give them a sense of community. Because, especially if you're at the beginning of this journey, if you think you're the only one doing it, why should you really? So by creating this sense of opportunity, we hope to inspire these people entering the world of open educational resources. And since we're trying to hope to recruit them to the movement, we think that putting an emphasis on community building and the encouragement that they gain from that will increase the likelihood of them getting more engaged in the future. Thank you very much.
Much. Will our next speakers come up and get set up? And in the meantime, are there any questions or comments?
Do the faculty have any incentives to join this workshop and this MOOC?
Yes, some of them do. So, sorry. Thank you. It depends on the university, really. Some of the participants have contractory obligations to practice OER in one way or another, so they clearly have an incentive. Others have been recruited to e-learning programs where they act as multiplicators in the universities. So, and others are just barely interested in the topic. So we got a very diverse group, and we're trying to sort of, work with them and regardless of their motivation of really joining these classes. And we hope that in the future, as I've mentioned, there will be a certification for the participants. And we hope that in the future, this certification will help to identify them as qualified OER producers in a repository that we're also currently building as part of the Open Education Austria project. So they will sort of like receive a badge or a label that indicates that they have done this program and which certifies them as like qualified to produce good resources and good materials. Thank you.
All right.
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, lovely. My name is Lisa Tanner, and I'm a postgraduate student at the Institute of Educational Technology at the Open University in Milton Keynes. I'm unusually funded through 2 streams. I don't get double the money. Somebody asked me that yesterday. No. So I'm partly funded through the OpenTel funding stream, which is set in place to develop TEL-related projects across the university, not just in our department, and also through a strategic research area called International Development and Inclusive Innovation. I'm also a proud OU graduate, so I did my undergraduate degree with the OU with 2 toddlers, so lots of those messages that were coming across yesterday about juggling life struck home yesterday. My current research questions, and they change on an often daily basis, are focused on the region of Ghana. And so the first question is, how are new teachers in Ghana developing digital literacy skills, both formally and informally? What digital skills are they expected to learn, kind of through the formal curriculum and through because of what policies telling them they need to know, and what are they actually valuing? And thirdly, to what extent are they using open educational resources for professional development and to improve their own pedagogies? And what are the challenges and opportunities to do so? So a little bit of context. Primary education in sub-Saharan Africa faces a huge gap when it comes to trained quality teachers of 25 million for primary education alone. That's not looking at any other kind of section of education. Some quotes. Sometimes teacher colleges, appear to be training students for how they think schools ought to be than how they actually are, not thinking about the challenges that teachers are going out and facing. There's been research that says that some of the colleges are actually positioning teacher trainees not as autonomous individuals, so they're kind of replicating the school day even, so they're wearing school uniforms, gingham dresses, sleeping in dormitories, having assemblies, and they're not kind of being trained to be autonomous decision-making individuals who are going out to be professionals within the next year or two. And bearing in mind Tickley and Barrett's research on the need for quality education, not necessarily just thinking about numbers, which is what the MDGs focused on, but thinking about quality, because although we've improved the situation on the numbers of children that are getting into school, their actual retention is a problem, and also some of them are still leaving school illiterate, functionally illiterate. So that has impact on things like whether families are choosing to continue to send their children to school, because if they're coming home not literate and not numerate, you'd kind of think again if you were a parent. And my research is very much kind of related to the Sustainable Development Goal 4C, which has this sub-clause about developing teachers through international cooperation. And it made me think, actually, as I was listening to the presentations over the last day and a half, how universities are responding to that in terms of, are they looking at all the research that's going on across all of their departments, not necessarily in international development or EdTech, and thinking, how are we contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals in any way? So how do they relate to SDG 1 or 5 or 9, for example? So that was just kind of a thought that was coming to me over the last few days. Somebody said yesterday about language and how we're using words like leapfrog. I've kept my leapfrogging word in there because I think it is important. I'm interested in working out how teachers are actually using mobile devices, and kind of evidence on the ground is that teachers are using mobile devices, even in rural and very poor Ghana. And how are they using them, especially women, how are they using them? Because some of the research is showing that women are embracing technology more. And finally, because I don't think I've got time to go much further, thinking about the politics of this kind of open, given the extent of the challenge, are OER the magic bullet for teacher education in sub-Saharan Africa, or is it too simplistic a view? Moreover, and maybe worse than, is it a kind of social control, thinking about Freire and what he was saying in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, or is it a kind of educational colonialism? Are we exporting our values onto various communities? And given recent criticism within the press in the last week or so by our own government about the conduct of some private foreign aid contractors, are they the best method to be delivering development programs? And I'm thinking, for example, the current program TTEL. I haven't got any chance to go any further. I just wanted to show you at the end, because I was very conscious not to just show the rural. Oh, it's not going there. There is development. And I wanted to kind of balance some of my pictures that were maybe a little bit rural, a little bit traditional. So you've got some images of that. Thank you.
So for your market, you should choose the animal that would be best. Okay, on to our final speaker.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. I've got 44 slides and no one's leaving until I've been through all of them, okay? We've locked the doors, Martin, yeah? Good, okay, cool. So I'm talking about open education and the unenlightenment. So this is actually a much longer talk I'm planning to do, so I'm cutting some bits out from this, but still quite a lot. So I won't go through all those bits. So my caveats were kind of setting up all the arguments I know people are going to say, so the Enlightenment is a bit problematic anyway. But I'll skip all those. So just assume that it's great. So the idea of the unenlightenment, we're kind of in an anti-knowledge era at the moment. So I think just a couple of examples here. So Britons have had enough of experts, alternative facts, and as I said earlier, post-truth was the word of the year. I don't know if this video will play. Let's try. Kind of haven't got sound. So this is one of our Muppet politicians saying that experts are in the same bracket as soothsayers and astrologers. It's like, and also the kind of Brexit, Trump campaigns were largely driven on this kind, and they're very successful at doing it on this kind of anti-expertise rhetoric, saying that you shouldn't trust experts; they're part of the conspiracy. I think this poses a real problem then for us in education, particularly in open education. And I'm sure a lot of you can sympathise with Jimmy Wells. I feel like my entire life we've been making progress, and now I don't know where we are, kind of thing. So, and so this is the slightly problematic thing. So I'm just using the Enlightenment really as a shorthand. I know it's really problematic historically, and it did lots of bad things, but it kind of just as a movement where we try to think about what we don't know and how we can go about trying to find that, and that knowledge itself was a good thing to pursue. And I don't know, a lot of you might have read the book *Sapiens*. It's a really good book, and he sort of makes the argument that really the scientific revolution was really good because about maps are a really good metaphor here. So beforehand, we kind of drew a map and said that's all the world we need to know, and that's it. But they started then to draw maps and say we don't know what's over here, but we're going to go and find out. And that's a kind of really good metaphor for how we kind of approach knowledge. And the unenlightenment kind of does the opposite of that. It says, like, there's all these areas over here, but you don't want to go there because you shouldn't trust what's over there. Knowledge itself is suspicious. There are things we don't want to know, and opinion is the same as truth. So I kind of feel, some of you might follow this place on Facebook, Scarfolk Council. I kind of feel like this is where I am at the moment now. So this is what education is like. You probably can't read it. It says, non-experts predict that by the year 2010, knowledge and facts will be redundant and even harmful to you, your family, and society as a whole. That's kind of that's where education is now. So I kind of want to do a whodunit, which is basically just throwing tons of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks in a way. So you can shout me down on some of these. So first of all, I think the kind of financial crisis was really important in that all the experts didn't predict it, and then none of the experts knew what to do about it. So it really undermined people's faith in experts and knowledge as a thing. Kind of basically, you could say experts don't know anything, and that kind of spread beyond economics, I think. The whole idea of false equivalence and balance has been really problematic, particularly in the UK with the BBC, where it tries to have a kind of a balanced view. And we saw this a lot with kind of anti-vaccine, climate change, and particularly in Brexit. So you'd have like 1,000 experts saying this is really bad, but we're going to balance that with one person saying I think it's quite good. And what that does about knowledge, it says that actually your opinion is as good as a kind of established fact. It chips away at that. So there's a really good documentary by Adam Curtis, if you haven't seen it, called Hypernormalization, and he argues that we've kind of become exposed to extreme views until they became the new normal. I think we saw this a lot with conspiracy theories. Like conspiracy theories used to be like that strange bloke down the pub who no one wanted to talk to, and now it's kind of just legitimate for everyone to kind of jump straight to conspiracy theory, and then I think particularly kind of post 9/11 we saw that. And what conspiracy theories do say is don't accept the kind of traditional knowledge. It's all part of the conspiracy. You shouldn't trust any of this stuff because there's a bigger picture going on, and that kind of really undermines the pursuit of knowledge. And I think Trump, Brexit, alt-right, all of those things, they're symptomatic of this unenlightenment, but they also drive it as well. So their whole rhetoric was based on don't trust these people, they're part of the establishment. You want new people to come in who will come and break that. And I think also really interestingly, so Audrey Waters writes really well about this kind of stuff, but the whole idea of the Silicon Valley narrative and disruption. So disruption kind of was originally about the digital environment, but it's really kind of, it's gone beyond that in a way now. Now it's just saying, the only people, so first of all, disrupting established sectors is desirable, and the only people who can disrupt established sectors are people from the outside. It says don't trust the kind of incumbents. Climate change, I think, was really important in that it kind of, because it's such a big problem, we've never faced before, this kind of global scale, it made scientists come sort of centre stage in the political agenda. And once they became centre stage, then it became up for debate, and it all became part of an opinion. Fake news, so people like Mike Caulfield have looked really at studies that have fake news spreads much quicker than real news, and again that kind of chips away at what we believe knowledge to be. There's a good Pew Internet report about the emotional temperature of online and how trolls kind of raise that emotional temperature. So that moves you away from being able to have a nuanced debate about very kind of complex issues. I think we overvalue expertise. We think experts are much wider than their area of expertise. I think in higher ed, we've been guilty of, as soon as we became businesses, we kind of lost our claim to pursuing knowledge and a social worth, that we just became business and became being able to criticise for that. People like this idiot, people like me, I think have kind of oversold the positive of being online, saying, hey, come online, it's great. You know, I used to do these talks without sort of thinking about some of the implications for that. So I'm going to let you off and not do the other 30 slides. So what I really want to explore from here is kind of, first of all, explore more of those roots of how we came to it, but also think about what can Open Ed do about it now in this situation. I think if you're Oxford or Cambridge, it doesn't matter to you so much. You're dealing with the other 50%. But for open education, that's been our role. I'm from the Open Universities to kind of bring education to the broader population. And I think if education is seen as part of the problem, that's a very different culture to be operating in. How'd I do, Nicole? Good. I'm okay. I survived.
One more round of applause for all of our speakers. And now lunch.